Okay, we are streaming live to YouTube, and as soon as I'm given the word, I'll go ahead and start the recording on this.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and start the recording, Shane, please.
Recording has begun, and I will go ahead and mute myself out.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a City of West Linn City Council meeting. It's a police collective bargaining listening session for Wednesday, April 7th, 2021. And we are meeting via WebEx because we continue to have COVID-19 protocols in place. Let's go ahead and call the roll. I'm the Mayor, Jules Walters. Council President Bill Relier.
Present.
Councilor Mary Baumgartner.
Present.
Councilor Todd Jones.
Present.
City Manager Jerry Gabrielatos.
Present.
Let's see, Acting Chief Mahuna, Acting Chief Peter Mahuna.
I'm present.
Sorry about that. And Stephen Schuback from our attorney that is doing the bargaining for us.
Present.
And then did I get Alyssa and our Human Resources Director, Alyssa Preston?
Present.
Thank you. And Councilor Rory Bielostowski could not be here today, and he's sent along a little statement, and I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Jones.
Thank you. Am I unmuted, Mayor?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Members of the community, appreciate you being here. I'm going to read a prepared statement from Councilor Rory Bielostowski. Dear community members, I had the opportunity to schedule a COVID-19 vaccine appointment over the weekend for the evening at 6:15 p.m. As a result, I'll be missing tonight's listening session so as to get my first vaccine dose. I apologize for my absence, but I wanted to get vaccinated as soon as I could, and I could not reschedule to a different time due to the scarcity of available appointments. Please know that I value your comments tonight. We'll watch the recording of the listening session afterwards to hear the feedback that you all have for the council on this important topic, and I will factor the comments received into my thought processes and decisions. Thank you in advance for sharing your thoughts with us, and I look forward to reviewing them myself in the immediate future. And Mayor and councilors, I will add to the community my apologies, but I made a commitment before this listening session was scheduled, so I will be here half of the time, and I will need to depart at 6:30 for a 6:45 commitment, but I too commit to listening to the remainder of the session I miss so that I hear this important feedback from the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. So let's go ahead and approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Yes, I move to approve the agenda as posted.
Second.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded to approve tonight's agenda. Do we have somebody to call the roll?
I guess I am. Mayor Walters.
Yeah. Well, I'm the last vote, so you
I'm
can start
sorry.
with somebody else, but that's okay.
Council President Relier.
Yes.
Councilor Baumgartner.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Mayor Walters.
Yes, again, thank you. So welcome everybody who's here listening in or watching the meeting or has come to ask questions or give comments. The City Council will be hosting 2 community listening sessions regarding the City of West Linn's upcoming bargaining with the Clackamas County Police Officers Association, CCPOA. The purpose of these listening sessions is to increase community engagement and transparency, to inform the public about the collective bargaining process, and to listen to community concerns and obtain feedback regarding police services to ensure the collective bargaining agreement and agency best meets the needs and priorities of the community. So thank you for coming tonight. Should we begin with public comment? Do we have anybody to speak? Mr. Boyle.
We had one citizen sign up for public comment tonight, a Mrs. Debbie Wong, but at this point, she has not joined the meeting. And there have been some communication earlier in the day that she might not be able to make the session tonight.
Okay. So then maybe we should move into have Mr. Schuback give us an overall, some overall information about how the bargaining process works and what our timeline looks like.
Certainly. Thank you for having me again, Stephen Schuback of Peck, Rubinoff, and Hatfield as your representative. The bargaining process is governed by the Public Employees Collective Bargaining Act under 243.650, Oregon Revised Statute. That's all available online, and there's further information also available at the Employment Relations Board website, which is a state website. Generally speaking, in Oregon, the parties have an obligation to bargain in good faith, and we initiate bargaining by establishing ground rules and a bargaining start date. By law, we are required to bargain for a period of at least 150 days. After 150 days, we can keep bargaining, but should either party declare that they would like to proceed to mediation, we can proceed to mediation. During the 150-day bargaining process, we meet at mutually agreed upon times, and we exchange bargaining proposals, generally in written format, and showing our changes. And we provide inputs or evidence and discussion about the different proposals that we have. Collective bargaining then proceeds in natural progression. We try to reach tentative agreements on each article or article provisions. And again, should the parties after 150 days not be satisfied with that process, we can proceed to mediation. Mediation is a formality through the Employment Relations Board where a state mediator is assigned our case and helps facilitate those discussions. The mediator has no power or authority to bind us, just merely to facilitate the discussions. Mediations are closed to the public. However, bargaining may or may not be open to the public depending on the ground rules that are agreed upon. The parties here have already agreed upon ground rules. We have agreed to alternating sessions of open and closed meetings. Our first bargaining session was back in April. That was a closed meeting to establish ground rules. Thereafter, our next session will be an open session, which we will, because of COVID, provide virtually. That session is April 19th, and there's more information on the city website regarding how to access that virtual meeting. When we are in mediation, we are required to mediate at least once, and at least 15 days must pass. Generally, the parties continue mediating with different sessions. However, at some point, if the parties do not reach mutual agreement, either party can file for impasse. When you file for impasse, that's a formal declaration to the Employment Relations Board identifying that mediation is not working. And for police and public safety units, in that declaration of impasse, there's a request for binding arbitration. In providing that request for binding arbitration, that means that we would have a third-party arbitrator decide our case. Generally, the parties agree to an arbitrator, or the Employment Relations Board is asked to give us a list of arbitrators, and we select an arbitrator through a process of lottery or lot, and end up with an arbitrator. And then subsequently, we schedule a hearing and go to binding interest arbitration. In filing for impasse as well, both parties are required to provide a final offer. That's a term of art that's very specific. It's our last standing offer prior to going to interest arbitration, with one exception. The final offer is really an opportunity for both sides to kind of see each other's bottom line. And the objective there is to maybe provide motives for the parties to settle on matters. In Oregon, we have a situation called last best offers, where 14 days prior to arbitration, we are required to give our last best offer, yet another term of art. We're not allowed to change that last best offer once submitted, absent error and a few little rules. But that being said, that last best offer, as well as the association's last best offer, is presented to that binding arbitrator, and we present our case and the union presents theirs. The arbitrator is bound to accept one offer or the other. The offer cannot be changed by the arbitrator, nor split, nor compromised. So it's all or nothing. The general theory behind that, as provided in Oregon, is that the parties are secure in their offers and try to tone down their offers in a way of improving success at arbitration. If you have an interest arbitration final offer or last best offer that has way too many proposals, you risk overdoing it. Whereas a last best offer that's concise and focused on the particular needs is more likely to succeed. That's the general public policy behind last best offers in Oregon, as opposed to Washington, where Washington, the arbitrator can pick and choose different variants of each other's offers. That being said, we present our case, then the arbitrator makes a ruling on that case. That takes several months. And once that ruling is decided and provided, we are bound to follow the terms of that offer, then that final ruling. Then the parties draft up the final contracts and we sign the agreements. There is no ratification process at that point by either party, because the final last best offer and the award by the arbitrator is the agreement. Now, I should back up also, when we reach tentative agreements by articles, those generally stand for interest arbitration. So what you take to interest arbitration are those matters that are unresolved. So the arbitrator rules on those and the tentative agreements flow with that. Any questions from council on that? I believe we've covered that in the past. I would like to raise something that was brought to my attention through public comment, Ms. Wong, particularly regarding the topic of mandatory topics of bargaining. Without going too deep into it, we are obligated to bargain mandatory topics. They're more commonly referred to as employment relations or matters of hours, wages, and working conditions. We have an affirmative duty to bargain those. There are also permissive topics. Those are matters which, either by case law or definition, are management's rights or prerogative to act upon. A common example of that is color of uniforms, or the type of cars that we drive. We have a right permissively to decide whether our officers drive Chevys or Fords. Meanwhile, however, sometimes permissive topics require bargaining impacts. In other words, the creation of that permissive topic may have an effect on hours, wages, and working conditions, and thus an impact. And we have the obligation to bargain the impact. The third type of bargaining topic is prohibited subjects. We do not bargain the law necessarily. So if the law says we have to pay X, like minimum wage, we don't bargain less than minimum wage. That would be a prohibited subject. Of course, that's a floor, not a ceiling. You can always bargain above the minimum wage. There was reference in public comment from Ms. Wong regarding policies. So just because we have a collective bargaining agreement does not mean that bargaining is contained to just the collective bargaining agreement. Matters of employment relations, hours, wages, and working conditions exist in all kinds of areas beyond the scope of the collective bargaining agreement. Matters subject to bargaining exist in policy and exist in past practice and exist in habit. And so when we are in bargaining, it's our opportunity, as well as the unions, to present all matters of employment relations, whether it's in contract or not. So akin to policies, should one party want to change policies that are mandatory or have an impact on a mandatory subject or permissive subject, then we do have a bargaining obligation there.
Can I ask a quick question? Is every officer on the police force part of the collective bargaining process, or are there some and not others? How does that work?
So we have a collective bargaining unit. That unit is defined by the recognition clause of the contract, and it is officers. We have positions above. We have positions also of recruit, code enforcement, record specialist, community service officer, property evidence tech, and code enforcement officer. Positions above the union are sergeant, captain, I believe, and chief. Is that right, chief? So those officers that are not part of the collective bargaining unit are not subject to collective bargaining.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions at this time? Any counselors? Council President Relier.
Yeah, Mr. Schuback, does our typical procedure include the officers receiving the same salary increases and benefits that those in the collective bargaining unit receive?
I can't speak to that directly. In bargaining the contract, we will follow the terms of that. But for officers that are not in the collective bargaining agreement, generally of higher rank, depending on their employment status, would define how they receive benefits. So if an officer is an at-will employee, which is a term of art, like in private sector, you work at the will of the employer and you have the choice to quit at any time, then that's independently negotiated by those officers. If an employee is under an employment contract, which is common for higher level positions like a city manager or a department head, then the terms of the employment contract would define raises.
Thank you. Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor, and forgive me if you were going to cover this anyway, but before we begin hearing from the public, may we clarify with them what we as counselors can and cannot do in this listening session tonight?
I think that would be a good idea. The importance of this meeting is to follow our ground rules that we have pre-established and to bargain in good faith. And in so doing, we are actually in bargaining at this time. Our 150-day period is in existence. And in so doing, we are open to receive public comment and receive information from our constituents, but we're not in a position publicly to engage in substantive discussions on bargaining proposals or other because we are in the collective bargaining process.
Thank you, Stephen.
Counselor Baumgartner. I think you might still be on mute, Mary. I'm sorry.
Whoops, sorry. Several people have asked me, and I don't know if this will be covered by a question, but if it isn't, about the aspect of having the sessions be public and private, and there's a little bit of confusion about about whether they're supposed to be open or so maybe you could clarify that a little bit. Thank you.
I can. There's no definitive law that sessions for bargaining are open to the public. There is some prior case law and an Attorney General manual or Attorney General's opinion on this and some ERB precedent, but it's not definitive. At the end of the day, the Employment Relations Board requires that we bargain in good faith. Ground rules are actually a permissive topic of bargaining. We are not required to have ground rules, but we are required to bargain in good faith and to meet collectively with the other party. That being said, we cannot condition bargaining on open or closed, nor can we condition bargaining on being recorded or not recorded. And there's specific case law on that. That being said, the compromise that's generally reached between open and closed sessions is that we alternate those sessions. I do believe there's some legislation pending right now for open sessions. I don't know the status of that legislation. But for this circumstance, as well as many other bargaining situations I've been in, the closest compromise you can have to open sessions is alternating unless the other party agrees to have full open sessions.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think one more question I have, and you can tell me if it's not an appropriate question, but I think what I'm hearing from the community is most important is a lot of these police reforms that they have been working on and talking about this, that are going through in the legislature, and hoping that that's part of our bargaining process.
Yeah, certainly. So without going into substantive matters on that, input that you receive as a city council from your constituents is certainly input I anticipate you would provide to me and our bargaining team as objectives that you would like to seek in collective bargaining, whether it's collective bargaining language or policy change or other. So again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to receive that input. No different than a union going to all their members to receive input on their proposals.
Excellent, thank you. And so do we have any members of the public on the line? Shane, I'm not seeing any attendees at the moment.
At this time, we have not had any members of the public join the WebEx.
Okay, and is there a chat feature on YouTube where maybe people are putting questions in? I know that happened in another meeting that we had on the post office. I don't have the YouTube open, so I don't know. I just called it the YouTube, like my grandmother.
I would like to mention, consistent with our objective of listening, I've been sent through the city some emails regarding some public concerns and some various provisions regarding police reform, policy change, and so forth. I can say that our bargaining team is considering all of those proposals and deciding how to and when to, or if at all, present those at a bargaining as a bargaining proposal. At the same time, the public should be aware that there's pending legislation, so there's a little bit of a timing issue going on in regards to legislation that's passed.
Okay, so yes, Alyssa. Ms. Preston.
Sorry, my hand raised thing went away. I was just going to ask if either the mayor or Stephen want to comment on when we talk about bargaining team, there is a team that is at the table, and then there is a broader team and how the council and staff teamwork works together. Do either one of you want to take that one just to share with the public?
Well, I can jump in here. We do have a bargaining team that's made up of myself and HR and some representatives from the police department. We also have a confidential viewer under the ground rules, which will be Council Member Baumgartner as an observer, for lack of a better term. But that's not just our bargaining team that for deciding and electing what proposals to put on the table. That's our bargaining team. That's the face of our team when we're in bargaining. Thereafter, we have management team meetings where other members of the police department, HR, finance, city manager, as well as input from city council and executive session, we develop our policies and our proposals.
Yes, and I think this was the first year that I've been on council that we've had several executive sessions to walk through the bargaining process. And that was very helpful to me as a mayor and councilor. That's not something that we've really done before. And so I appreciate you doing that. And that is in that spirit that we're having this listening session tonight as well. So Councilor Baumgartner.
Thank you. Is there a chat on the YouTube? And if there isn't, which someone is trying to watch but can't access chat, what is another way for people listening right now to access this meeting?
I believe the chat might have been disabled in to prevent the creation of public records that needed to be collected, stored, and then produced. I believe is probably why the chat was disabled on the YouTube. The ability to access and speak to this group would have been through signing up to speak publicly in the WebEx, is my understanding.
Alyssa,
Okay, so
I believe the city will take public comment just through its website. Is that correct?
yeah, I was going to say, if somebody's watching and they want to ask a question, they can email any one of the counselors. So like I would be jwalters@westlandoregon.gov. And you're welcome to email me and I can relay your question, or any of the counselors actually. It's just the first initial and last name @westlandoregon.gov.
So I have a question from Kathy Salvaggio.
Okay.
Back to the open and closed sessions of bargaining. The question was, what is to prevent the tough issues, important issues, from being bargained out of the public eye and leaving the soft stuff to the public session?
Well, we can't control the presentation of proposals by the union. Certainly, we can present our proposals in open and closed sessions. We do have a duty to bargain in good faith and to keep the bargaining process moving forward. But again, we can't control how the union presents their information. However, as we reach tentative agreements, those will be posted. And also we will have a commission or a council member present as a confidential viewer. So there's some transparency that way to our executive or our council. So internally, we have some transparency that way. So council is aware of both what's happening in closed and open sessions.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up is it public record who are on each bargaining team? Is that shareable information?
Well, when we have a public session, certainly it's exposed and there are faces. I don't believe the union is obligated necessarily to reveal their names. There are always some safety concerns in light of current circumstances nationally, but we're not in a position necessarily to mandate the union to articulate who is on their bargaining team necessarily, although we know who those persons are. We know that who the union attorney is by the ground rules, and we know who the president of CCPOA is. If the union should want to present themselves publicly, that's fine, but there are some safety concerns I'm aware of. On our side, we have announced who's on our team.
And where can the public access that information?
I'll leave that to Alyssa Preston. We can likely post that. I'm not sure if that's been posted yet or not, but publicly I am the chief negotiator, Alyssa's HR, and then we have a few members from the police department. And then of course, council member Baumgartner, you're the confidential viewer. And we have a note taker as well.
If the council
Thank
wishes,
you.
I can put it on we have a centralized web page that we're trying to keep all the information located. Might get pretty lengthy, but if you wish, I can put it there.
I think that's great. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Salvaggio, for your questions. Thank you, Mary, for reading those. I'm not seeing any more emails from me yet. I don't know if anybody else has one. I also am being respectful of Todd's time at 6:29. So, you have 5 more minutes. Okay, excellent. I guess I have a question. What do you think is? What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about the bargaining process?
Probably that there are a lot of rules regarding mandatory and permissive topics. There are a lot of things that we do need to bargain that may not be well understood by the public because it's seen as a management type of right. The impact bargaining likely opens the door to the most of that procedurally. Also that the public doesn't understand, we don't just bargain a contract, we bargain all matters of employment relations. Typically, collective bargaining focuses on the collective bargaining agreement. However, there are many times where bargaining policy or outside matters that aren't necessarily in the contract. Also, collective bargaining is a period for both parties to present and discuss current circumstances or ongoing events that may not necessarily result in a formal agreement, but also just in a mutual understanding or in a clarification that we're all on the same page on how we do things. I think lastly, I don't think the public understands that there's really 2 types of bargaining units, being a strike unit and a strike prohibited unit. The strike prohibited units, such as law enforcement, fire, 911, DAs, and other defined by statute, have binding arbitration, as opposed to the other units that are strike permitted have strike remedy.
Thank you. Any more questions right now? And I am not seeing any more emails. So I know it's only 6:31 and I don't want to end early in case people are signing on. So is there another topic do you think that we should cover, Mr. Kubak?
I think I've covered most of the procedural topics intended for this meeting regarding the standard process. That process is also articulated again under the Employment Relations Board website. I think they had a flow chart for a while, so if people wanted to visualize what that process looks like, I believe that flow chart is still available. You do have to hunt a little bit on that website, but there are informational guides on that website.
Okay, thank you. That's good information. Jerry, is there anything you want to add?
No, thank you.
Okay. Excellent. So let's see. Does anybody else have another question? I guess would be my first question. Because I feel, it's walking, I think we've learned a lot about the process, and I'm feeling encouraged about it. So I'm hoping that the public will too. But we definitely want to hear the feedback from our community, because I know people, especially with this bargaining session, are really focused, not just here, but around the corner, around the country, on police reform and accountability. And those issues are very important to everyone right now. So Ms. Preston, you have a question.
I was just going to add that for the public's interest, we do have a web page under the HR web page that is going to host all the information that we can share. It's going to host all the links, the registration to be able to register to observe these public meetings. It has the ground rules listed. It has the current collective bargaining agreement. And it will have any tentative agreements that are agreed to throughout the bargaining process listed there. So just wanted to throw that out there again, that everything that we can possibly put out publicly will be hosted on that particular location. The next bargaining session is April 19th, and you can register there to be sent a link to observe.
Thank you very much. I think we all just received the same email. So if anybody wants to ask a question, please do. All hands just went away. So I just received it. Excuse me, an email from the Westland Community for Police Reform.
Mayor, sorry for the interruption. Just notifying
Yeah,
everyone that I must leave now. Take care.
Okay, you too. Thank you, Counselor. And the members of the Westland Community for Police Reform will be making comments next week. We only met today to discuss it for the first time. So, but they did ask, please let us know who is on the bargaining team for the police department. Is Chief Mahuna on the team? That's the first question. So I don't know if you want to take them one by one, Stephen.
Sir, so we will be posting that, but Chief Mahuna is not on the face-to-face bargaining team. Certainly, Chief Mahuna would provide input as needed for operations and for matters of collective bargaining and related, but he's not on the face of the bargaining team when we meet in sessions.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, to what extent do the recommendations of the Oversight Task Force have to be pre-approved by council before they become part of what the city bargains for?
That's really not a procedural question as much as a substantive question. I am hired to follow your direction of council and guiding me on what proposals you want to proceed on. And internally in an executive session, we discuss those. So akin to the listening session, as council members receive input from the public, you direct the bargaining team on matters of collective bargaining and proposals that you would like to proceed on.
And so those were two questions from that group. I see another email from Miss Debbie Wong, who said, could you ask Chief Mahuna what barriers he sees in the contract that blocks him from holding his officers accountable, or what he would like to see in contracts.
I need to chime up here. That's beyond the scope of this listening session, unfortunately.
Is there can you answer some of it, or is it?
No, I think really here the purpose is to receive input and feedback from members of the public about what their concerns are about collective bargaining, or what proposals they would like to see, or changes they would like to see. But consistent with the ground rules, we should not engage in substantive discussions about our proposals outside of the bargaining table.
Okay, thank you.
And let me clarify, we have to honor the intent of the ground rules and the intent of this meeting. And if we don't bargain in good faith, the city has risks of an unfair labor practice with the Employment Relations Board, which is additional litigation through the Employment Relations Board by the union. And we do not want to engage in anything that assimilates any kind of bad faith bargaining or violation of PECBA.
What are the consequences if that happens?
Well, there's a hearing and we have to litigate. That's an enormous expense, and thereafter the ERB can sanction the city in many different ways.
Councilor Baumgartner, do you have another question?
I don't see any others. Thank you.
And you're going to be the member of council that attends the meetings, but there are some ground rules with Councilor Baumgartner's attendance too. Is that correct, Mr. Schuback?
That's correct. And the ground rules and the observer rules have been posted on the website.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions at this moment. I'm trying to think, are there any particular topics that we missed that you think might be helpful to share with the public? Mary, do you have any thoughts? Yeah.
I mean, not procedural related that I've been asked.
Okay, thank you. And Council President Relier, do you have any more questions or thoughts that you'd like to share?
I do not. I believe the process has been well laid out. We've provided ample opportunity for the public to comment, to become familiar with the ground rules, and I look forward to the collective bargaining outcomes.
Thank you, Council President. I appreciate that. Oh, here's another email. So here's a follow-up email. Aside from these listening sessions, will City Council be meeting separately to decide what input it wants to provide to the bargaining team?
I can answer that, and that we do meet in executive sessions under labor relations to discuss our bargaining proposals at your direction. I don't anticipate public meetings on that, again, because we are in bargaining.
Okay. And I was just going to ask Mr. Gabrielatos if he would share with us where the task force is right now and their recommendations. Is that okay, Mr. Schuback? Just ask sort of the timeline there.
I think as long as we talk about timelines and not substantive matters through the task force, this listening session is intended to provide public input through the process that we've provided. The task force is certainly welcome to provide more input in these listening sessions, but in all clarity, we are receiving task force input through that process independently.
So Jerry, can you give us just a little sort of update without telling us any substantive policy information or process information and timeline?
There is a task force meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. and the agenda has been posted. I just wanted, that's as much info as I think I can provide.
Okay, sounds good. And do they have a timeline of meetings after that one, or are they working towards finalizing their initial task?
I think they'll make a decision about that tomorrow. It's difficult for me to hypothesize.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, well, I would hate to leave anybody out, but it is awkward since we don't have public comment. I don't know, Mary, if you're seeing any more emails right now.
No, I'm not.
I'm not. So I want to see how you feel, Councilor Baumgartner, about ending this meeting a little bit early, knowing that we have a second listening session next week.
I think that is fine. I do want to make sure, for instance, before when we were saying, some people were on YouTube and maybe we were thinking they could somehow communicate through YouTube, that make sure that people understand how they can communicate questions. I also get a little bit concerned about the noon deadline for something like this, because I understand just logistically wise, it's challenging, but maybe if we could somehow give a caveat to that, like, get your comments in by noon if you possibly can, but let them know how they can communicate questions in the next session.
Yeah, I think I totally get that too. I feel like even though we're in the virtual realm right now, I would like to make it as easy as possible for the public to be able to share their thoughts. So maybe we can revisit that at some point. Maybe Shane has some advice he can give us later.
Actually,
Counselor-
just saying people could email was great. I think that really worked. That maybe we could say that next time, just ahead of time.
Okay, sounds good. And I think Shane is on the line now.
Counselor Baumgartner, the reason we had to turn the chat off on the YouTube is that those potential those public records being created there, the ability to collect them, capture them, and redistribute them if they were requested by citizens was a difficult or challenging thing to do, because I believe those materials are sort of the property of YouTube. So that was one of the reasons why we made the call on restricting that chat feature, and that we'll have to reevaluate that for future meetings. I don't want to say that it's off the table completely, but we want to make sure that we could produce records on request. I know many of the members in our public appreciate and value our strict adherence to being able to produce those records for public records consumption. Maybe Alyssa or Jerry could speak to the amount of promotion of this listening session. I was asked to assist in running this meeting due to staffing shortages. So maybe they could explain the amount of public advertisement of it. I know that we have one more coming up, I think, next week. And, getting people to sign up to speak or provide written comment is a function, I think, of how much we advertise it, or we may even have the ability to sign up to be notified. I know there's many, many lists on our website. You can sign up to receive communications automatically from the city for different meetings and things like that. So I want to point out some additional resources that the community could consume from our website. So I'll go ahead and mute myself and let Mr. Gabrielatos or Ms. Preston speak to the advertisement aspect of this meeting.
Thank you, Shane, for all your work on this.
Alyssa, do you have the answer for that?
I can tell you what I know. I was not the public engagement person on this, but I know that it is located, it is publicized 2 times on our website, actually three different web pages, one including the city's agenda page, one on the web page that I was just mentioning, and then there's also a separate web page that was specifically just about the press release. The council also asked that it was publicized in the tidings, which I believe that did happen. It was after the deadline, unfortunately, for the Westland Wednesday newsletter last week. However, it did go out again today. And it was on social media immediately last week. So I know of those.
Thank you. And I shared it on my Facebook page as well. So hopefully it's next week we'll have a little bit more turnout, or more people people are welcome to submit emails during the week as they come to your mind, and we'll read them aloud during next week's meeting. But I would sincerely like to thank Mr. Schuback for being here, taking time to share that information with everybody. I think, sort of demystifying the bargaining process is very helpful. And, it's just very helpful, I think, for people to understand how it works and know that, yeah, just to know how it works, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, my point is, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. I appreciate being here and trying to help with clarification of the procedural aspects. I do ask, however, that should people want to inquire further, they do so through the city website that we have established, and not contact me directly, because I work at your direction. So the public should understand that those inquiries should go to the city, and then I would be shown those through our normal process.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's a very good point. Does anybody else want to say anything before we close out? No, everyone's good. Well, thank you so much, everybody, who was here, who was listening. Thank you for those that did email. I hope you got some answers that were helpful. Please feel free to reach out to City Council at citycouncil@westlandoregon.gov if you have further questions that we might be able to ask Mr. Schuback to give feedback on. And everybody have a lovely Wednesday evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.